TBTL.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Hey Dummies. My name is Andrew. I'll be your dummy today, and we have a question coming in from Chicago. That's right, this is from Jake in Chicago, who has a question about our kind of post-production editing process on TBTL. Jake says, you were talking recently about all the post-production stuff you do on the podcast after you get done recording it, but before you post it. Can you share that process with us? Oh my gosh, you're asking me if I will go into some great detail about audio processing? Oh my goodness. Will I ever? Actually, though, as I say that, it occurs to me I should caveat this a little bit. I am not somebody who knows tons and tons about audio processing and audio engineering. There are people that I've worked with in this industry who know so much more about it than I do. We do some very basic things here, but I will definitely walk you through them. But you got to remember, the way Luke and I do this show is kind of atypical to how most people produce their podcasts these days. And I'm going to give you a really quick little breakdown here about how we record the show before I actually turn to my computer here and show you in detail how I kind of process the audio when we're done recording the show every day. I will mention that I recorded a Hey Dummies video just like this, maybe about a year or so ago, where somebody wanted to know more about our actual recording process. And maybe I'll try to include a link to that in this show description on YouTube if you want to go back and look at it. But in that video, I actually showed you my whole layout of my studio here and kind of walked you through the process of recording the show. I have an audio board here to my right that all of my microphones and audio inputs go into. I have a computer here to my left where I play audio sounds, and I also use this as my working computer and my editing computer. And then I have this computer that I'm talking to you on right now. And this computer that we're using now is also the computer that I use to connect remotely with Luke. Of course, Luke's in a different part of the state than me, so we do the show from our own respective studios. We use this computer and a program called Riverside, which more and more podcasts use these days. It captures video, it captures audio, and the nice thing about this particular program, Riverside, is that it gives you a lot of power after you're done recording to process and edit your audio very specifically. So when I'm done recording with Luke, if I were to want to, if there were some major audio issues, like Luke is way louder than me or something, I could go into this Riverside program and individually download my audio track, individually download Luke's audio track. If we had guests, I can download their audio and then piece them all back together, and in doing so have a lot of control over audio levels and edits, and it's a really powerful way to produce something. Having said that, you got to remember Luke and I and our roots. We're basically producing a live AM radio style show every day and posting it to the internet. We're not doing a lot of editing. We don't do a lot of post-production. I mean, the opposite of us would be like a Radio Lab back in the day, or This American Life, with a lot of really creative edits and music coming up at certain places. We just do all of that live. If you hear music sneaking up on the show, it's because I'm pushing a little button over here and music is coming up. I'm not adding it in later. So the reason I say all of this is to say, while this Riverside program that I'm talking to you on right now and recording myself on is a very, very powerful tool, I don't really use it in that regard. I use it to connect with Luke, to talk to him, but really we record the show live, just directly into my other computer right here. Kind of what you hear is what you get, sort of. So when Luke starts talking, I open up his microphone over here on the board, his microphone meaning this computer, essentially. I open up my microphone, I open up the audio coming out of this computer, and I mix it all live over here, and it's also all recording live into this computer over here. And in a minute, we're going to shift perspective, and you're going to see my computer, and you'll just see it records as one big green wave file. And let's take a look at that now. This is the wave file. You see, I'm recording it I recorded it into a program called Adobe Audition, which is a program that's been around for decades now. I started using it in the late 90s when it was called Cool Edit. It's a very powerful program, but also it can be a very simple to use program. It's the type of thing where it provides what you need at your level. I'm a really big fan of Adobe Audition. And what you're seeing here is I was sort of like mindlessly zooming in and zooming out while I'm talking to you here. But this is basically what it looks like when Luke and I do the show together. So every day at the beginning of the show, I'll sort of what I call like slate the show. I'll say, okay, this is a recording for February 21st of TBTL here. You can listen to what I said at the beginning of the show. All right, restarting this file here. The rest of them are still rolling. This is TBTL for Friday, the 21st of February. Stand by.
Okay.
Then there's a bunch of silence, and then the actual cold open begins here.
How do I act so well? What I do is I pretend to be the person I'm portraying in the film or play.
There you go, Sir Ian McKellen. So that's how the show begins, which means all of this stuff that I said leading up to the beginning of the show, just getting ready, we're going to delete that. Just highlight it, and you delete it. Very, very simple. I'm going to do the same thing to the end of the show here by taking a listen to us signing off here.
Slide down the dinosaur,
Andrew.
as you like to say. Good luck
Yes.
to all. Bye.
All right, see you Monday.
Music fades.
Power out.
There's your famous power out at the end of the show, how we end every show. I might just tighten this a little bit by grabbing some of this empty space here and hitting delete.
Power out.
And then deleting any extraneous silence after that. So now our file is almost exactly, let's see here, 1 hour, 20 minutes, and 30 seconds long. You can also see that there are some markers in here. This show is not super marked up, but you'll see that there's a little marker up there. And during the show, sometimes I'll have those sort of scattered about the file, and that means there was a small little mistake I want to clean up. Maybe I stumbled a little bit more than usual and I want to clean it up, or maybe Luke and I had to stop down for a second because he got a delivery, or we were switching segments and so we just had to like kind of stop for a moment. And so I put little markers there to let me know that I need to go back and clean something up. In this case, what you can see here is, and it's amazing how I can just recognize this just by looking at it now, but I can tell this here, where the red bar is, that's where segment 1 ended today. Everything right here is Luke and I talking. We kind of stopped down. We took a little break as we got ready to thank the dazzling donors. I probably sent them to Luke during this time, emailed him. We probably pre-read the dazzling donor message a little bit. I'm not going to play it here because this was just a conversation between Luke and I don't want to like peel back the curtain too much, but I can tell you that everything right here was not for broadcast. That was us. How long is this section? You can sort of see over here that this 1 minute and 7 seconds was us. When we say we took a break, that's us just like quickly getting our ducks in a row so that we can begin the second segment of the show, which begins with us thanking dazzling donors. So I'm going to highlight all of this stuff that we don't want. I'm going to hit delete there, and you'll notice I hit this marker a little bit late, but this is probably the beginning of the dazzling donor segment right here.
We was hoping for some razzle-dazzle.
Razzle-dazzle.
That's right, man, razzle-dazzle.
On your mark. On your mark.
And so that's how that begins. And if I click here, this is going to be the end of segment 1.
Brutalist, just never at the same time or independently or ever is the deal.
We was hoping for...
So you hear there's some breath in there and kind of a longer pause than we need. So I'm going to clean that up a little bit more too, and I'm going to put a marker there. Now, this whole idea of putting what we call a break in there and a little marker, it goes back to the era of when we had ads during the show. We had to sort of mark the time, and then the ads were automatically digitally inserted at exactly the time, if you can see there in the bottom of the screen, at the time code specified. We don't have ads anymore, but I'm still in the habit of just sort of marking this as a break in case we ever do need to populate this with like automatic promos or something like that. But this is what it's going to sound like for you when it hits the podcast.
Just never at the same time or independently or ever is the deal.
We was hoping for some razzle-dazzle.
Razzle-dazzle.
That's right, man, razzle-dazzle.
On your mark.
So there you go. That's the only sort of like edit in the middle of the show. I'll sort of mark that time code into my notes in case we need it for later. But that's it. This is basically the show. Very little edits, just a little cleanup at the beginning, a little cleanup at the end. Had to clean up that little break in the middle, and everything else is just staying in the show as we recorded it. Now, this is a pretty good recording right here. You can see that the levels are pretty uniform throughout. You can see, obviously, where things get a little bit louder in places like this, where the WAV file is reaching the top and bottom of the screen. There are places where it's a little bit quieter over here when the conversation maybe got a little bit more serious or less laughy. In fact, you can almost guarantee that probably a lot of these places where I'm sort of what we call peaking here, it's probably me laughing. Let's hear.
A speculative mining
Yeah, I
operation.
was going to say, or just absolute. So you could hear me laughing and talking over Luke, and so things got loud there. This is probably something similar here. Yeah.
Appreciate the support.
Yeah, and you can even see sometimes you can see this little bar down
Go
here.
to Jones and Music.
You can see that meter that shows the greens and the yellows, and then sometimes it even gets up into the reds. So one thing I'm going to do, even though I don't really need to, this is a pretty good looking show as far as levels are concerned, but I recorded this little recording earlier to sort of show you what it would look like if it was more problematic. If you had like me or Luke being really quiet over here and here, but then the other one of us is way loud like this, and you had some very, very like severe dynamic range issues like what you're looking at here, that could be a problem. So what I do for every show is I just apply a little bit of light compression to this so that it takes those loudest moments and it just squishes them down a little bit. You don't want to overdo it. If you overdo it, you can really hear it. And it's really hard to explain what overcompression sounds like, but you know it when you hear it, and it's bad. And I'm sure you've heard it before and maybe didn't know exactly what you were hearing and why it sounded bad, but you can just hear when something is overly compressed. So I try to do it very, very lightly, but I'm going to apply a process that just sort of brings these highest, loudest moments and brings them down a little bit more in line with the average. And I can't explain exactly the science behind what I'm doing, but I know that I come to this program and I go to dynamics processing and it'll open up this grid thing. And I just learned how to do this a really long time ago. And I don't understand exactly what I'm seeing. I bet you people who are watching this right now or in our audience understand processing better than I do. All I know is if you had a straight line like this, it wouldn't impact the audio file at all. But if you were to take that straight line and maybe just bend it up at the top like I'm going to do, it's going to apply some very subtle compression so that the highs get squished down a little bit. If I were to do it extreme, it would look something like this. Here, let's do an extreme one and see what that looks like. This is bad, what I'm about to do, by the way. It's not going to sound good, and actually it'll show you, or it'll give you an example of what it sounds like when something is overly compressed. Oh my gosh, I've never even seen anything like that before. That might have been too drastic. Might have been too drastic. You want to hear what it sounds like as it trying to turn the volume up on it a little bit. Let's listen to something that is over compressed. Is that person still in radio?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
Because
many
honestly,
questions.
like I have a vague sense of maybe
It's really hard to explain that sound, but what it's doing is it's pulling up all of the low volume and it's pushing down all of the loud volume, and you get that really weird sound. So I'm going to undo all of that, obviously. This is our original file again. I'm going to go into amplitude and compression. I'm going to go into dynamics processing. I'm going to get rid of this ridiculous setting here. I'm going to put a dot right about there, maybe a little bit higher up like that. I'm going to bring this down, and it's going to apply that same kind of thing, but in a much, much, much subtler way here. I don't know how noticeable that is to you, but it has just sort of brought down some of those loudest parts. I'm going to undo it to show you what it looked like before. See? And then I'm going to redo it one more time. It's very subtle what I've done there, but that's kind of the processing I do just to make the WAV file a little bit more uniform. And then I'll do one more thing here. I'm going to turn it back up. And now those loud parts are banging up against the top and bottom of the screen again. That's no good. So the other thing I'm going to do is something called a hard limit. And when I apply this hard limiter, I actually have the settings saved. So I'm just going to go with my preset here. But it's basically going to draw a line across the top and bottom, and it's just going to cut off the wave peaks, and so it's going to be a more like, it's almost like, I always think of it as getting a haircut. I turned it up so it's a little bit loud and shaggy up there, and then I'm going to go to hard limiter, and again, I sort of pre-programmed this, and so I know the hard limiter is set the way I want it to be, and you're going to see it's just going to cut off the wave file at the very, very top there. None of them are actually hitting the top of the screen. It's just a little bit shy of that, and now we have a very uniform looking wave file.
How do I act so well? What I do is I pretend to be the person I'm portraying in the film or play. Yeah.
We'll skip ahead a little bit to get to the part where Luke is talking.
Won't stop until this little guy's leaping and laughing like the other kids.
As my grandpa likes to say, hot diggity dog. As I like to say, hot damn!
Have a good show, dummies. What you do is so important.
All right, hello, good morning, and welcome everyone to a Friday edition of TBTL, the show that just might be too beautiful to live.
It's your luck.
Okay, it's your lucky day. You just found a USB drive in the parking lot. All right, there you have it. I got to be honest with you. I don't know if any of that made sense. I realized like halfway through that thing that like even though I do this every single day and have used this program for 30 years, I don't really know how to explain what I'm doing with a lot of that stuff. You can probably hear me lose my confidence halfway through that. I worry that anybody who would even find that interesting already knows more about it than I do. So I guess I'm sorry, or you're welcome, or whatever we're supposed to say at the end of these things when they sort of crumble around you. But anyway, I can guarantee you this. Next week, Luke will be back with another Hey Dummies, and it will have nothing to do with audio editing. I can almost guarantee that. I don't know why I said it like a Cajun crocodile or alligator. Which do they have down there? I need to end this video now. I hope you all have a really wonderful weekend. Email us some questions that you'd like answered. Andrew@tbtl.net is the email address to use, and put Hey Dummies in the subject line. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.